we're going to be going back to the past a little bit with the post-mortem of Never Alone. Yes, my name is Grant Roberts. I'm the lead game designer at Eline Media. That's my Twitter handle. I got in on the ground floor of Twitter, so I have a pretty short Twitter handle. So like most of us, I've been playing games for many decades now. I got my start in the business back in 1997 when Chris Charla hired me to be a writer and editor at Next Generation magazine. I've been in game development for almost 16 years now. That's me almost 16 years ago, unfortunately, 16 years and 50 pounds ago. Since then, I've worked with Lou Fasulo and Chris Taylor, two of the legends on the game panel, and a lot of other companies. I got 10 ship titles, and I went to Eline Media in 2013 and started working on Never Alone. Never Alone is an atmospheric puzzle platformer. You guys may or may not have heard of it. It was developed, it was released in November last year. It is a local co-op game, released on 3 different platforms. We won a BAFTA and 2 Games for Change awards for the game, so that was pretty fun. You can see Dima Veriovka, our art director, and Ishmael Hope, the lead writer on the game, right there, and me with taking a BAFTA selfie. We are featured in all kinds of mainstream and enthusiast press like BBC Radio, The New Yorker, NPR, and Wired, and all kinds of things. And Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, which is pretty cool. Hearing Terry Crews say Iñupiat and Never Alone was pretty great. And also Terry Crews is the host of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire now, so who knew? So let's talk a little bit about what happened with Never Alone. As much as I'd like to keep looking at this forever, it's kind of mesmerizing. But first off, the good. We collaborated really closely with the Iñupiat people. That's in Barrow, Alaska. It's the northernmost city in Alaska, or in the U.S. Very closely with the Alaska Native community. We called that process inclusive development. Here are just a few of the many people we collaborated with, male and female, young and old, members of the community. We didn't want to, nor could we have really made this game without that constant collaboration with them. It was really unlike anything I had ever experienced, and I think unlike a lot of things that people have experienced in this business. It started with a spirited roundtable discussion in 2012 up in Alaska. There were elders and youth and artists and storytellers and historical advisors from the Iñupiat, Tlingit, Yupik, and Tagish communities. Again, not your typical collaborators or stakeholders when it comes to game development, right? We, as the developers, really needed to, we had a long journey there. We really needed to earn the trust of the Alaska Native people and the Native community in general, because I don't know how familiar you guys are with the history of Native-inspired games in this business, but we don't do that well when it comes to making them. We needed to, at Eline, we really needed to articulate our role as borrowers of the culture, as stewards of the culture, as students of it, and not as people who are going to appropriate it and just use it for their own gain. And so there was a long way to go for us to earn that trust. There were a lot of partners during this process, as I showed before. That was just about a third of them. But our most frequent was Ishmael Hope, like I showed before, accepting the BAFTA. He is a half Iñupiat, half Tlingit storyteller. He was the lead writer on Never Alone, and his role was as the lead writer, and it was to help us get immersed in kind of this incredibly rich world of Iñupiat stories and the history of Alaska Native stories. He shared hundreds of stories with us. He helped us select one of those stories as kind of, we narrowed it down to about 6 or 10 stories, and then we eventually narrowed that process down to one story that would form the backbone of what Never Alone would turn out to be. We picked the story of Canucksayuko, which is very difficult to spell. It's 4 U's and 3 A's, in case you need to spell it. Once we chose Canucksayuko, we met with Minnie Gray, who is the daughter of Robert Cleveland. Robert Nassar Cleveland was the first person on record to tell the story of Canucksayuko in written form. So once we chose that story, we met with his daughter, who is his only surviving relative, who gave us her blessing to make the game and to continue the development. And it was, you could see her with the playing co-op with our studio head, Sean Vesey. Now, it wasn't a completely painless process. Obviously, like I mentioned earlier, we had a long way to go to earn the trust of the Alaska Native people. We kind of had to let go of our notions of traditional storytelling. A lot of things that we think of when we think storytelling, traditional storytelling in games is very Western, is very kind of Americanized or very European or Western. So we had to let go of a lot of that because a lot of their stories are, they're short, they meander a lot, there's a lot of humor in there. Some of them are pretty brutal, surprisingly so. So that was a journey to go through. We also had to learn to see through each other's eyes. We went up to Barrow a few times in Alaska to visit their community and visit where they live, and really get into see their world, the world that they came from in the past, and the world that they're in right now that they're still living with. And a bunch of storytellers and elders and community members came down to Seattle, where our development team is based, from Alaska, and got to see the game that we were making and kind of weigh in on things and really help us make the game that we wanted to make, that everybody wanted to make together. But it was really the most rewarding thing that I've ever been a part of, and I've been doing this for almost 18 years now. One of the most important things to us was to make sure that the game represented kind of the core values of the Iñupiat people, and we did that by asking them, what are the most important values to you as a community, and we received literally dozens of responses for that. There are a lot of them that we didn't include, like subsistence living and practicality. A surprising amount of humor in their day-to-day life. It's pretty harsh up there, but still a lot of humor. We chose to focus on 3 of them. That was intergenerational exchange, resilience, and interdependence. So for resilience, at least, you have to be pretty resilient to live in the Arctic and to accomplish anything in the Arctic, right? Life in the Arctic is incredibly harsh, whether it's in the real world that they're in right now. I think even the high temperature right now in the middle of May is not that significant. Let alone the world of Never Alone, where there was this eternal blizzard that you were constantly struggling with and fighting against, bracing yourself against the wind. And that was kind of the main antagonist of the game. So you had to be very resilient to survive those things. And not just that, but the game gets kind of difficult towards the end. So you kind of have to be resistant or resilient to be able to make all the jumps and time your puzzle platforming elements the right way. For intergenerational exchange was important to have in the game as well. You have to perform an act of kindness and respect for this elder, Iñupiat, which means owl man, to receive 2 keys to your quest in the game. One of them is the bola that you can see here. It's a traditional tool that you kind of spin around and throw. Nuna has to keep that safe from the Manslayer character, the Manslayer who appears in a lot of traditional Alaska Native stories. She has to receive that bola in order to succeed on her quest. But just as important, we learned, was that the wisdom that she received from this elder character is as important as that bola tool that she uses over the course of the game. So exchanging that kind of wisdom and respect with the other generations was important to have in the game as well. And of course, interdependence. Oh God, that's adorable. We had a few fidget animations in the game like this that we call team fidgets, where if the characters are at a certain distance away, they'll perform a custom animation, like they'll hug like this, or Nuna will be like, come over here, and Fox will run over. You'll die. So Nuna and Fox obviously need to depend on themselves to find the source of the blizzard and to survive, to be resilient in the Arctic. But they also need to live in harmony with the land and the spirits around them. So a lot of the Alaska Native people believe in this concept of sila, or sia. I can never pronounce that one correctly. But it's the concept of, like, everything has a soul, everything has a spirit, from the rocks and the plants and the ground, all the way up to the people ourselves and the moon and the stars in the sky. Everything has a soul, everything has a spirit. So Nuna and Fox can't succeed in their quest without each other, but also not without living in harmony with the entire world around them. And that's what interdependence kind of meant to us while we were making the game, and that was the value that we tried to instill. Now, interdependence and intergenerational exchange were in the game experience too. Online co-op would be a really cool thing to have in a puzzle platformer. Unfortunately, it never really felt like a good fit for Never Alone. With the kind of precision that you need for a platformer, any kind of latency at all, doing that online can be pretty tricky. So we decided early on to not have that feature. Plus, we had a pretty small team, comparatively speaking, and that kind of would have blown up our development time to have online multiplayer. So we focused on local co-op instead. Also, because it's tough to maintain that kind of atmosphere that you have, and you saw some of the screenshots earlier, it's tough to maintain that atmosphere when you're talking into a headset with somebody across the country. So we focused on local co-op instead. We reinforced that interdependence by playing side by side with other people. We allowed people that opportunity to do that. We had intergenerational exchange where parents could play with their kids and friends could play with each other and family members, which is important. And Nuna and Fox play very different. They're very different in the game. So people with different skill levels could play those two characters and play together at the same time. So, and local co-op isn't really that common in puzzle platformers, unfortunately. I wish it was more common. You see it in Trine and Guacamelee, sort of, and not really too many others. But it went well for us, which was nice, especially compared to one of the things that went wrong. So we were kind of big for an indie studio. This is a team photo. This isn't even all of us. 3 people weren't there for this picture when it was taken. We did a lot of external and internal play tests when we were working on this game, as many as we realistically could given our schedule. We brought people in, we brought in friends and family members and kind of local play testers. So we thought we had a pretty good handle on all the issues that we were going to face. So we were kind of blindsided by some of the things that we ran into in the reviews and the streams and the Let's Play videos and things like that. So by default in the game, the AI, if you're playing in single player mode, the AI will try to path to you, will try to get to you, just line of sight to you. So the designers had to place these triggers, each one of these that we built in Unity, obviously. Each one of these shaded boxes is a trigger. All of those labels are waypoints, and not all of the waypoints are labeled. So we would have to set up triggers for jumping to jump across a chasm, or ledge triggers so they could climb up and things like that. And the designers would have to place each one of these things manually, which is a lot of work. We also would place, or the level designers would place, and I would say, go place that there. These concept of beacon triggers, where when a character enters it, they would stay in place there until the conditions were met. If don't stay here and wait here until my X distance is greater than yours. Stay here until this puzzle is completed. So we had to set up all of those manually as well. There was a lot of work that involved in that, but our goal was with AI to make it so that you didn't notice it at all, which meant that the AI was doing its job, right? Like it was just completely invisible. And we thought we had a pretty good handle on it, like I said. There was a lot of testing involved with it, a lot of fixes that resulted from that testing, then another round of testing, and then even more fixes. We went back and forth a lot because we knew that this was going to be a big deal. So by the time we launched, we were pretty sure we nailed it. That wasn't really a problem when we were seeing that in play tests anymore. So we were pretty devastated to see how wrong we were. All of the reviews, pretty much, and there have been hundreds of them at this point, but pretty much every review mentioned the AI as a negative. In some cases, the only negative in the game. So that was pretty unfortunate for us. And there were some other issues as well. We gave the European press a PS4 copy of the game so they could review it. We were still working on the 1.01 patch after we gave them the review copies of the game. Because we were trying to fix a bunch of stuff that we found after submission before release. You guys know how that works. But Sony didn't approve the patch until all of the reviews were written from the 1.00 version of the Sony patch, including the infamous 4 out of 10 from GameSpot review, who reviewed it on a PS4 from Europe before that patch. And then the European version was delayed anyway, so there was no reason to rush for that. So the lesson learned there, do a closed beta if you can. We did not do that internally on this one. We did a lot of play testing, but we didn't do kind of a formal, kind of wide approach to testing, and I think it kind of bit us in the end. So what else could have gone better? Like I said, we were big for an indie studio, relatively. We had 4 full-time QA in this picture, I think, which is a lot for indie. We knew it would be tough to launch on 3 different platforms. We launched on PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and Steam. And 10 different languages at launch, which is a lot for an indie studio. We figured digital only would be easier, right? We wouldn't have to worry about retail and distribution and end caps at Target and Walmart and stuff. Plus, the executive team at Eline had 100 cumulative years of experience in games, most of that in like big AAA retail releases. And for the most part, we were right. It was kind of a challenge to get it running on the PS4 and Xbox One, especially when the dev kits came in as late as they did for our development process. But the engineering team, the QA team, and the production team, which was a producer, they all did a heck of a job. The problem came when we tried to do even more than that minimum. Once word got out around the game, we went to every trade show in the world, literally. We went to Australia, Germany, Japan, you name it. You can see me there, the tall guy with the hair there in the back underneath the banners and stuff, and a few other developers here. Every time we went to one of these trade shows, we had to take people away from the development. And we borrowed against the schedule to pay that, but we didn't necessarily borrow enough time to as much as we needed to. And we did adjust the schedule to compensate as a result. It wasn't enough. We did adjust the schedule. The original release date was going to be on November 4th, also known as Call of Duty Day. Which is that we were kind of all about that. We were kind of looking forward to it. We were going to be like the indie darling movie coming out against the summer blockbuster. After that, we decided that we needed a little bit more polished time, just 2 more weeks, and we would really get to nailing it and release it. So we pushed the release date by 2 weeks. Here are some of the games that released 2 weeks later on November 18th. You may have heard of some of them: Dragon Age, Far Cry, Little Big Planet, GTA 5 on the PC. I know all of you have played WWE 2K15, so we don't need to talk about that one. And then less than a week later, Super Smash Brothers and Pokemon. So going up against a summer blockbuster works really well, just not when you're going up against 9 summer blockbusters at once. That's not the first time this has happened in my career, by the way. Back on the first game I released, The Wheel of Time for the PC back in '99. It was released around the same time as Quake 3 and Unreal Tournament. So, yeah, try to pick your window. So there's a lot of precedent for coming out around a different time, right? Like most of our peers in the indie space have kind of figured that out. You can see some of our compatriots here. You notice that big wide open space in September to December, where we ended up. We'll probably follow their lead next time and kind of pick a better spot to release from the indie space, in the indie space. But clearly we did something right. We won 2 Games for Change awards. Like I said, we won a BAFTA. We got a 10 out of 10, the infamous 10 out of 10 from Eurogamer, which caused them to change their reviews policy. And more, hundreds of reviews, most of them pretty good. Never Alone certainly was not perfect. We know that. And I think those of you who have played it can attest to that. But we're really proud of what we made, both as a development team and together with the Alaska Native community. It was a small team. There were, like I said, a lot of platforms that we released on simultaneously, a lot of languages, a lot of demos that we had to do. The release date window was pretty crammed. And so that meant that the game wasn't perfect, but we're really proud of what we made. And we've got some really cool stuff in the pipeline coming up next, which I can't wait to talk about. I can't talk about that yet, though. So that's it. It's a short presentation. I wanted to keep it short after the future was discussed, so that's it. Thank you guys very much.
Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah. If you have any questions, I'll be sitting around here.
Yep.
Oh, you
Here
got
we
one.
So about the AI you mentioned, do you guys know now what was wrong with it, or have you learned something?
What was
after
wrong
the
with what? I'm
release?
sorry? What was wrong with what?
With the AI?
Oh, well, the AI, it turns out there wasn't really anything wrong with the AI. The AI was doing its job really well. At all times, it was trying to get to the player. But there was just the vagaries of the beacon trigger system. The beacon trigger is what I mentioned before. Like, we would set them up, and sometimes, the player would go through them right when the AI was turning around, or they would go into them at the same time and create a race condition. There wasn't really anything fundamentally wrong with the core tech. There just needed to be, that's why I mentioned the closed beta, just trying to identify a lot more of those really edge case issues, because we didn't identify a lot of the edge case issues when there were about 100, 150, 200 people playing it. But when you get up to, we've got, I think, over 2 million downloads now, thanks to PS Plus being free for PS Plus in April. Sorry if you guys missed that. We were on PS Plus in April. But yeah, there are all kinds of issues are still being identified now that we just couldn't catch because we were a small team. But yeah, I would recommend that if you're making a puzzle platformer with AI, that you don't require manually placed triggers for everything, for ledges and jumping and that. That's my takeaway from it. Another question? Yes.
When it came to getting started with the idea for Never Alone, did you guys like set out and say like I want to make a puzzle platformer, or did you guys start with the idea like I want to tell a story about these people?
Yeah, I kept it a little short, and I skipped over a lot of that early part just because it was a short presentation. But there's an organization called the Cook Inlet Tribal Council based in Alaska, and they help the Alaska Native community at-risk youth with things like addiction and depression and finding jobs and stuff like that. They have been looking for a while to try to share their message and share their culture with people, and they actually approached us back in 2012 and said, we want to make a video game to help with this. We're like, okay, that sounds great. So once they did that, we had that roundtable discussion, and then we kind of met with people to try to figure out, based on the values of the Iñupiat people and the community, what would be the best genre of game to make, and what could we do with a team this size, et cetera. And we settled on a puzzle platformer after all that stuff happened, but they came to us first, which was pretty surprising.
Okay. Anybody else? No? Oh, one more. There we go. Very hesitant on there.
I guess this is a follow-up to what she just asked, but as you were saying, since video games and general media these days don't have the best relationship with Native cultures, when they did approach you, did they lay down any ground rules as to what you could and could not do as to represent them well?
I think we laid down the ground rules together. They did not come to us saying, here's what you can't do, just because a lot of members of that community, a lot of groups in that community have been burned a few times, and so there wasn't anything specific they came to us with. It was more like we knew that both of our groups had to come together to make the game together, to come to an understanding, and it wasn't about violating any commandments. It was more about just gaining that respect over time, and that still persisted to the point where it would be a real shame if we didn't keep making more things with that community, because we built such a really great relationship with them now. So I hope we can make some more.
Thanks very much, Grant. That was really good.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.